Rafael DeLuca, a feared Spanish-Italian mafia boss known for his cold precision and ruthless control, insults a young waitress, Aria Montes, during a private dinner with his men, unaware that she's the younger sister of Aria Montes, the only woman he ever loved and lost under tragic circumstances. When Aria accidentally spills water on him, his fury explodes in front of everyone. But when she quietly answers him in perfect Spanish, uttering the same secret words he once shared only with Valeria, Rafael's world shatters. Determined to uncover how she knows them, he sets his network in motion to trace her. When he learns who she is, guilt and obsession collide, forcing him to confront the sins of his past. Aria's presence reopens the wound he buried in blood and vengeance. Through their turbulent meetings, she becomes both his punishment and his redemption. She makes him face the truth about Valeria's death, and in doing so, gives him a reason to live again. It's a story of forbidden love born from loss, guilt, and redemption, where every look burns, every silence confesses, and every kiss carries the ghost of the woman who came before. The story doesn't end here. Subscribe to Mafia Soul to see what happened next, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. What happens when a man who commands fear insults someone who carries the one thing he spent years trying to forget? In Barcelona, power didn't whisper, it prowled. Behind the velvet curtains of La Serena Roja, deals were made. Enemies pretended to be friends, and every candle burned with secrets worth killing for. That night, the private dining room shimmered with gold light and danger. Cigars smoked lazily in crystal ashtrays. The men seated around the long oak table laughed the way powerful men do, without ever truly smiling. At the head sat Rafael DeLuca, the man they called El Lobo, the Wolf, a Spanish-Italian mafia boss whose empire stretched from the harbors of Valencia to the clubs of Naples. He was elegance wrapped in cruelty, a man who didn't need to raise his voice to be obeyed. His green eyes held the kind of calm that only came from having survived too much violence. Tonight was supposed to be routine, a dinner to discuss truce and business. But somewhere between the wine and the smoke, fate decided to interfere. Because working that same night, carrying a tray she could barely steady, was Aria Montes, a 23-year-old waitress fighting to keep her mother's clinic open. She'd spent her life avoiding the world her sister once entered. The world that had taken her. Her sister's name was Valeria, and the man sitting at the head of that table, the one with the emerald ring and the dead, calm eyes, had once been the man Valeria loved. Aria had promised herself she would never go near him. But life has a cruel sense of humor. The restaurant had been short-staffed, and Aria was assigned to his table. She tried to steady her breath as she approached, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She kept her gaze down, her face neutral, her voice polite. To him, she was supposed to be invisible. But as she poured water into his glass, her hands trembled just slightly, and a single drop escaped, sliding down his sleeve. The room froze. Raphael's hand stopped midair. He turned his gaze slowly toward her. The silence that followed was the kind that bends the air. "Sabes lo que valen mis trajes, Nina?" he said quietly. "Do you know what my suits cost, girl?" The men around him chuckled, sensing a show. Aria's chest tightened. She could feel their eyes crawling over her, waiting for her to apologize, to shrink, to beg. But she didn't move. Her pulse roared in her ears, but her eyes stayed locked on his. And then she spoke. "La luna no es escon del lobo," she whispered in perfect Spanish. "Solo lo espera." The moon doesn't hide from the wolf, it waits for him. The laughter stopped. The air thickened. Raphael's expression didn't change at first, but something in his eyes shifted. The words hung between them like smoke. Familiar, impossible, sacred. Those were Valeria's words. Their secret vow. The words he had whispered against her skin years ago, before the bullets, before the blood, before everything turned to ash. He leaned forward, voice barely human. "Que de gist? What did you just say?" Aria didn't flinch. She placed the bottle gently on the table, her eyes soft, unreadable. "Ask the ghost you left behind, Senor DeLuca." Then she turned and walked away. Her footsteps echoed down the corridor like fading memories. Rafael sat frozen, every heartbeat a gunshot in his chest. His men looked at one another, confused. None dared to speak. The wolf didn't blink, didn't breathe. The weight of the past pressed down on him like a blade. He saw Valeria's face, her smile, the way she used to tease him with those exact words whenever he grew too consumed by darkness. The moon doesn't hide from the wolf, it waits for him. For the first time in years, the world felt unsteady beneath him. When the dinner ended, he said little. His men joked, drank, and left. But Rafael stayed behind, staring at the empty chair where the waitress had stood. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, rough with something dangerous. "Santos," he said to his right-hand man, who waited by the door. "Find out who she is." Santos frowned. "The waitress, chief?" Rafael's eyes narrowed. "She's not just a waitress." Outside, Barcelona glittered under the moonlight. The streets pulsed with music and crime, but Rafael heard none of it. He saw only the ghost of a woman he'd buried years ago, and the echo of her words in another's mouth. That night, he didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Valeria's face fading into Aria's. Every breath carried her scent, jasmine and smoke. Every silence whispered the same impossible truth. Someone out there carried his dead lover's voice. And he would find out why. Because for the first time since Valeria's death, the wolf felt something stronger than guilt. He felt alive. Sleep did not come for Rafael DeLuca that night. The city outside his penthouse glittered like 1,000 tiny lies, and still, he sat in the dark, shirt unbuttoned, glass untouched, cigarette burning low between his fingers. The wolf, for once, was pacing inside his cage. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Not the waitress, but Valeria, laughing under the Andalusian sun, her hair wild in the wind, her voice teasing him with that same phrase. La luna no es escon del lobo, solo lo espera. The moon doesn't hide from the wolf, it waits for him. Back then, it had been their private vow, a promise made in the kind of love that doesn't survive the world they lived in. And when she died, that phrase had died with her. Or so he thought. Now it echoed through his mind, spoken by another mouth, one he couldn't stop thinking about. By dawn, the ashtray was full, and Rafael hadn't moved. When the doorbell finally rang, it was a relief, a reason to breathe again. Santos entered quietly, a folder in hand, expression uncertain. "I found her, chief." Rafael didn't look up at first. Her name? Aria Montes. The sound of it made the glass tremble against the table. Santos continued carefully, opening the file. 23 years old. Works double shifts at La Serena Roja. Lives with her mother in Sant Andrew. No record. No debts. He hesitated, then placed a single photograph on the table. Two young women smiled at the camera, arms around each other, sunlight in their eyes. Valeria and Aria. Rafael's throat tightened. His hand hovered over the photo like it might burn him. He whispered the name again, softer this time. Montes. His pulse slowed, then hammered painfully in his chest. The room blurred. Memories he'd buried under blood and business clawed their way back. Valeria's laughter in his car, her tears the night she begged him to leave the life, the last phone call that ended in gunfire. Santos's voice was a distant echo. "Do you want me to handle it?" Rafael's eyes snapped up. "No," the word came out like a growl. He drew in a sharp breath and closed the file. "I want to see her." That week, the Wolf of Barcelona became something strange, restless, distracted, human. He sent flowers first. White orchids. The kind Valeria used to love. They came back the next morning with a note. "Don't send me ghosts." He sent money next, enough to pay off her mother's clinic debts twice over. It was returned unopened, the envelope marked declined. Finally, he sent a message. A simple one. "Dinner. 1 hour. My driver will wait." No reply. He waited anyway. An hour turned into 3. 3 turned into silence. Santos found him still sitting in the back of his car, staring at the empty street. "Chief," he said softly. "She's not coming." Rafael's jaw tightened. "She will. Someday." But even as he said it, he knew she wouldn't, at least not yet. Not until she decided to. 2 nights later, he went himself. He parked his black Maserati across from La Serena Roja, engine off, lights dimmed. Inside, the restaurant glowed with the same soft gold as before, its windows flickering with laughter and luxury. And there she was, Aria, hair tied neatly back, moving between tables with quiet grace, her eyes unreadable. She didn't look at him, couldn't know he was there, but Rafael watched her the way a drowning man watches the shore. Every movement reminded him of Valeria, the tilt of her chin, the calm in her defiance. But there was something else too. Strength, distance, a shadow that wasn't her sister's, but her own. He stayed there long after midnight, just watching. When the restaurant finally emptied, Aria stepped outside, her coat draped over her arm, exhaustion softening her steps. She paused for a moment under the streetlight, exhaling into the cold air, unaware of the eyes that followed her from across the road. Rafael didn't move, didn't call out. He just watched. The wind caught her hair for a second, just enough to make his heart ache. And in that moment, he realized something terrible and beautiful all at once. He wasn't chasing a ghost anymore. He was chasing the living proof of what he'd destroyed. As her silhouette disappeared into the dark, he whispered to no one. Lo siento, Valeria. I'm sorry. The words drifted through the car like smoke. For the first time in years, they didn't sound like an excuse. They sounded like confession. And outside, the moon hung low above the city, waiting for its wolf. For days, Aria Montes tried to erase his face from her mind. But memory was a stubborn ghost. Every night, when the restaurant lights dimmed and silence settled over her small apartment, she saw Rafael DeLuca's eyes, those cold green eyes that once held her sister captive in love, and then in death. She told herself she hated him. She needed to, because hate was safer than grief. Hate didn't leave you gasping in the middle of the night, hearing your sister's voice whisper promises that never came true. Valeria had been the light of their family, beautiful, reckless, full of laughter that turned heads and softened hearts. When she met Rafael, everything about her changed. The phone calls came less often. Her laughter became quieter. And one day, she stopped coming home altogether. Then came the call, cold, official, final. A car explosion on the outskirts of Madrid. Wrong time, wrong place, they said. But Aria had seen Rafael's face in the papers that same week, attending a funeral surrounded by men in black suits, expression unreadable. She knew the truth then. Valeria had died because she loved him. And now, 8 years later, he had found her. The first invitation arrived with flowers. She burned it. The second came with a handwritten note. One dinner. No lies. She almost tore that one too. But something in those words, the arrogance, the unfinished grief, felt like a challenge she couldn't ignore. She didn't accept because she forgave him. She accepted because she wanted him to hurt. The car he sent arrived just before sunset. Black, silent, smelling faintly of leather and smoke. Aria sat in the back seat with her hands clasped tight in her lap, staring at her reflection in the tinted window. Her pulse betrayed her calm face. The driver said nothing as they passed through the iron gates of Rafael's coastal villa. The estate looked like a fortress overlooking the sea, glass, stone, and shadow. When she stepped inside, the air was warm with the scent of cedar and old wine. And there he was. Rafael stood by the window, suit immaculate, but his eyes told a different story, sleepless, hollow, human. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavier than any gun. Finally, Aria broke it. I didn't come here for apologies. Rafael's gaze flickered, just once. Then why did you come? She took a slow breath, each word laced with fire. To see what kind of man could destroy everything my sister loved and still call it survival. He didn't move, didn't defend himself. The quiet restraint in him made her angrier. Do you know how she died? Aria demanded. Of course you do. You caused it. You built a kingdom out of her grave. Rafael's hand tightened on the edge of the desk. You think I wanted that? Want doesn't matter, she snapped. You used her, Rafael. You took her heart and buried it with your sins. Her voice cracked, and she hated that it did. For the first time, he looked away. When he spoke again, His voice was softer, almost broken. She loved me. That's the truth I live with. But love couldn't save her from the world I built. I told her to leave, Aria. I begged her to. She stayed because she believed I could change. He turned toward her, eyes glinting with guilt. She died protecting me. The words cut through the room like glass. Aria's anger faltered. What? She found a traitor in my ranks. Someone who planted the bomb meant for me. His voice trembled, rough. She tried to warn me. She was on the wrong road when it detonated. Aria shook her head, disbelief and pain warring in her chest. You're lying. I wish I were, he whispered. The truth crashed over her like a wave. The hatred she'd clung to began to unravel, replaced by something worse, grief, raw and familiar. You should have died, she whispered, tears threatening. Not her. I know, he said quietly. Every day since, I've wished I had. The silence that followed was unbearable. For a heartbeat, they were two ghosts sharing the same room, bound by a love that had already killed once, and the unbearable knowledge that it could destroy again. Aria finally turned toward the door. I shouldn't have come. Rafael didn't try to stop her. His voice followed her, low and heavy with something that sounded like prayer. You sound like her when you're angry. She paused, her back still turned. No, she said softly. I sound like the part of her you killed. The door closed behind her with a quiet finality. Rafael stood alone, staring at the sea beyond the glass. The reflection staring back at him wasn't a wolf. It was a man haunted by the ghosts of two sisters. And somewhere outside, Aria walked into the night, her heart caught between vengeance and the faintest whisper of understanding. Neither of them knew it yet, but the wound between them had just begun to bleed again. The days after the confrontation blurred into silence. For Aria Montes, the anger that had once been her armor began to crumble. Every word Rafael had spoken echoed inside her like an unwanted prayer. She died protecting me. It couldn't be true. And yet, something in his voice, the fracture, the sorrow, hadn't sounded like a lie. Aria needed to know for herself. She began to dig. It started with a visit to a journalist friend who still owed her sister a favor. Then old contacts from Valeria's days in fashion PR. People who'd whispered about the powerful man she was seeing, the one she couldn't leave. Each clue led to another door, another secret Rafael had buried under money and fear. Finally, one of the names led her to a man called Luis Ortega, Rafael's former underboss, now living like a ghost outside Girona. When Aria found him, he was sitting alone in a crumbling chapel, the smell of incense and regret thick in the air. His hands trembled as he lit a candle for the dead. You shouldn't have come here, he said without looking up. DeLuca's world swallows people whole. I'm not afraid of him, Aria said quietly. I just want to know how my sister died. Luis studied her for a long time, eyes glassy and tired. You look like her, he said. Same fire in your eyes. Same curse. Then, finally, he told her. Valeria had discovered that someone inside Rafael's circle was planning to assassinate him. A rival family had paid for betrayal. One of his own men had planted the bomb meant for Rafael's car. Valeria found out the night before it happened. She had called Rafael to warn him, but he hadn't answered. So she went herself. She got in the car meant for him. Luis's voice broke as he finished. She wasn't killed by love. She was killed by loyalty. Aria stood frozen, her breath thin and cold. For years, she had built her hate like a fortress. But now, the truth had cracked the walls. Her sister hadn't been his victim. She'd been his shield. And Rafael had been living under the weight of that truth ever since. That night, Aria went to the cemetery. The wind over the cliffs carried the salt of the Mediterranean, cold and clean. The grave was simple. Valeria Montes, 1994 to 2017. A small bouquet of lilies lay wilted at the base of the stone. Aria knelt, tracing her sister's name with trembling fingers. I thought hating him would keep you close, she whispered. But it only kept you buried. The tears came quietly, breaking years of restraint. For the first time since Valeria's death, Aria let herself cry, not for justice, but for loss. The moonlight caught on the ring around her sister's name, a silver wolf engraved at its edge. Rafael's ring. She didn't know that, miles away, he was driving the same road. Rafael DeLuca didn't plan his visits. They happened the way nightmares did, without warning. When the guilt got too heavy, he went where it all ended. He parked the car at the edge of the cliffs and walked the rest of the way in silence, the wind tearing at his coat. He came at night, when no one could see him kneel. Each time, he brought no flowers, only the same whispered apology. Lo siento mi luna. I'm sorry, my moon. This night felt different. He could sense her, Aria, somewhere in the air, like a ghost's breath on the wind. He stopped at the edge of the path, hidden in the dark, watching the soft glow of candles flickering at Valeria's grave. Then he saw her, Aria, kneeling, her shoulders shaking, her face wet with tears he hadn't earned the right to see. He wanted to go to her, to speak, to confess everything again. But the weight of his sins kept him rooted in place. He watched her whisper something to the grave, then press her lips to the stone. For a long moment, he just stood there, hands trembling, eyes burning. 2 lives, 2 forms of grief, divided by one name carved in marble. When Aria finally rose and walked away, she never looked back. But as she passed the gate, she paused for a heartbeat, like she knew someone was there. Rafael waited until she was gone before stepping forward. He placed a single white lily where she'd knelt, his voice breaking as he whispered, "She was the light I couldn't keep, and you, Aria, are the fire I don't deserve." The sea below roared in answer, a confession swallowed by the wind. And for the first time in years, the wolf didn't feel invincible. He felt human. 2 souls, grieving the same woman, standing in the same darkness. One mourning love, the other forgiveness. Neither realizing that fate had already begun to pull them back together. The truth had changed everything, and nothing at all. For Aria Montes, knowing that Valeria had died, saving Rafael didn't erase the pain. It only deepened it. Love had made her sister brave, but it had also made her blind. Now Aria carried that blindness like a curse, staring at her reflection and seeing too much of her sister staring back. She told herself she'd go to him for closure, that she needed to say the words Valeria never could. But deep down, she knew closure was just another lie. Rafael's villa loomed against the night, like a confession waiting to be heard. He was waiting when she arrived. No guards this time, no mask of authority. Just Rafael, standing by the open balcony doors, the sea behind him dark and endless. For a long moment, they only looked at each other. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was alive, charged, trembling. Finally, Aria broke it. "I know the truth," she said. "About Valeria. About what really happened." He didn't ask how. He only nodded, as if he'd known this moment would come. "And now you hate me less?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "No, I understand you more. That's worse." Her words landed like a blade wrapped in silk. Rafael stepped closer, his voice low. "She died trying to save me. I've lived every day since trying to die in her place." He walked to the table, poured himself a drink, and stared into the glass as if it held the ghosts of his past. "After she was gone, something inside me broke. I buried her, and with her, every part of me that was still human. What came next," he paused, his eyes darkening, "was vengeance, and power, and blood." He turned toward her. "You've heard the stories, Aria. The wars, the killings, the fear. All of it began the day Valeria died. I thought if I became the monster the world already believed I was, maybe I could make the pain mean something." Aria's voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "And did it?" "No," he said softly. It only made the silence louder. The raw honesty in his tone unsettled her. This wasn't the ruthless man the world feared. This was someone broken, bleeding behind his armor. She took a step forward. "You think carrying guilt is the same as paying for it. It's not." His gaze lifted, sharp and searching. "Then what is?" "Change," she said. "Real change." Rafael gave a bitter smile. "Change doesn't bring back the dead." "No," she said, "but it stops you from joining them." Her words hit him harder than a bullet. He studied her face, the way her eyes burned, not with hate anymore, but something far more dangerous, truth. "You sound like her," he whispered. Aria shook her head. She loved the man you buried, not the monster you became. He flinched, as if struck. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The air between them tightened, heavy with something unspoken. Guilt, anger, longing. He stepped closer, and she didn't step back. I see her when I look at you, he said quietly. The same fire, the same stubborn heart. It's like she sent you to punish me or save me. Aria's breath caught. Maybe both. They stood inches apart now, the scent of smoke and salt between them. Every instinct told her to walk away, but she couldn't. He raised a hand, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch trembling, reverent. For a moment, the world held its breath. But then Aria stepped back, her voice low and steady. Don't mistake guilt for love, Rafael. You don't love me. You miss her. Rafael's jaw tightened. You think I don't know the difference? She met his gaze. I think you've forgotten there was one. The silence that followed was a wound neither of them knew how to close. Finally, she turned toward the door. If you really want to honor her, stop hiding behind your empire. Stop pretending the blood you spill is for her. Rafael's voice cracked as he spoke. And what about you, Aria? What do you want from me? She paused at the threshold, her hand on the doorframe. I want you to stop haunting the living. And with that, she was gone, leaving the scent of jasmine and defiance lingering in the room like a ghost's kiss. When the door shut, Rafael pressed his hands to his face, the weight of her words settling like ash. He had confessed everything except the one thing that scared him most. That for the first time since Valeria's death, his heart had started to beat again. And it was beating for her sister. The city hadn't seen Rafael DeLuca in a church in years. Not since Valeria's funeral. But that Sunday, the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Mar filled with murmurs as men in suits, politicians, and ghosts from the underworld stepped through its ancient doors. No one quite knew what to expect. The Wolf of Barcelona had called a mass, a public one, dedicated to the woman whose death had nearly destroyed him. Some said it was guilt. Others said it was theater. But for Rafael, it was penance. The stained glass windows caught the morning light, scattering it into shards of blue and crimson across the marble floor. Rafael stood near the altar, dressed not in black this time, but in gray, unarmed, unmasked. His men lined the back pews in silence, and used to seeing him this way, vulnerable, exposed, human. At the center of the altar lay a single framed photo of Aria Montes, surrounded by white lilies and candles. Her smile, frozen in that photograph, seemed to fill every corner of the cathedral. Aria arrived late. She hadn't planned to come, but something in her refused to let the day pass without facing him one last time. She walked through the aisle, head high, ignoring the stares that followed her. When Rafael saw her, a flicker of something, pain, relief, fear, passed over his face. The priest began the mass, his voice solemn and steady. He spoke of forgiveness, of love beyond death, of redemption through truth. But all Aria heard was the sound of hypocrisy echoing against the vaulted ceiling. When the priest invited Rafael to speak, the room fell into a hush. Rafael stepped to the front. His voice, when it came, was low but clear. I built my life on control, on power, on fear. He paused, scanning the faces of the men who had killed for him, who had worshipped him like a god. But none of that saved me when she died. He looked at Valeria's photo, his hands trembling slightly. She loved me more than I deserved. And I repaid that love with a world that consumed her. I've spent years trying to silence her ghost with violence. But you can't kill what's already part of your soul. Murmurs rippled through the pews. Even his closest allies shifted uneasily. Aria stood from her seat, her voice sharp as glass. Then why now, Rafael? She said. Why pretend you care when you've done nothing but drown her memory in blood? The room tensed. No one interrupted a DeLuca. But Rafael didn't flinch. He turned toward her. Because I can't carry it anymore. Aria's eyes burned. You think a speech makes you clean? You think God listens to men who build empires from graves? Her voice cracked through the air like a whip. The priest tried to calm her, but she stepped forward, her anger unstoppable. You didn't just lose her, you used her. You made her death your excuse to destroy everything she believed in. Look around you, Rafael. Every candle here burns for someone you took from another family. The crowd watched, breathless. Rafael's jaw tightened, but then something inside him broke. He walked down the steps from the altar, his footsteps echoing. And then, to everyone's shock, he fell to his knees. Right before her. The gasps filled the cathedral. His men moved instinctively, but he raised a hand, stopping them. Let them see, he said softly. He looked up at Aria, eyes wet, voice trembling. You're right. Every drop of blood in this church is on me. Every life lost in my name. I've confessed to no one because I didn't think I could be forgiven. But if she loved me, and you still stand before me, maybe forgiveness doesn't need to be earned, only faced. Aria stared at him. This man who once ruled entire cities, now kneeling like a penitent sinner before her. I'm not God, she said quietly. I can't absolve you. I'm not asking for absolution, Rafael replied. I'm asking you to witness the man she tried to save, before he disappears for good. The weight of his words silenced even the cynics in the back. In that moment, power itself seemed to shift. From the feared Mafia lord to the woman standing before him. The wolf was on his knees, and the moon was no longer waiting. She was judging. Aria's voice softened. Stand up, Rafael. If you want to honor her, live differently. Stop kneeling for forgiveness. Start walking toward redemption. For a heartbeat, the two of them stood in a fragile stillness, her strength meeting his surrender. When Rafael finally rose, it wasn't as the man he had been. Something in him had broken, and something else, quietly, had begun to heal. The congregation watched in stunned silence as he placed his hand on Valeria's photo, whispering, I destroy no more. And for the first time in years, the wolf bowed not to fear, not to power, but to love. The cathedral lights had dimmed hours ago, but Rafael DeLuca was still on his knees long after everyone else had gone. The candles had burned down to pools of wax, and the air reeked of incense and confession. He had done it, stood before his enemies, before God, before her, and torn the mask from his soul. But redemption wasn't peace. It was exhaustion. When he returned to the villa that night, the house felt too big, too quiet. The walls that once echoed with orders and threats now whispered with memory. Valeria's laughter haunted one corner. Aria's voice haunted the other. He poured himself a drink, but didn't taste it. The rain outside began to fall, soft and relentless, like the world trying to cleanse itself. He didn't expect her to come, but she did. Aria Montes stood at his door, rain glistening on her hair, her coat clinging to her frame. He froze, unsure if she was real or another ghost conjured by guilt. I shouldn't be here, she said quietly. Then why are you? She hesitated. Because I saw what you did today, and for the first time, I didn't see a monster. He let out a bitter breath. That's only because you're seeing what's left of me. She stepped inside, eyes sweeping over the dimly lit room, the half-empty glass, the untouched piano, the walls lined with the ghosts of his past. This is what you call home? She asked softly. It used to be, he said. Now it's a museum of mistakes. Aria set her coat on the chair, her voice gentler than she intended. Maybe that means you're ready to stop making them. Rafael looked up. Their eyes met, stormed to flame. The air between them thickened, humming with everything unsaid. They talked for hours. About Valeria. About what came after her. About how Rafael had built an empire from grief and learned too late that it had become his prison. At some point, he admitted the truth that had been choking him since the night Aria spoke those secret words. You remind me of her, he said, voice low. But it's not her ghost I see anymore. It's you. You're what's left of the light she gave me. Aria's throat tightened. Then don't turn me into her. I'm not here to heal your guilt. I know, he murmured. But when I look at you, I remember what it felt like to be human. Silence stretched, soft and trembling. The rain pressed against the windows like distant applause. Raphael's hand brushed hers, tentative at first. She didn't pull away. Her pulse betrayed her, fast, unsteady, alive. He leaned closer. The smell of whiskey and rain between them. A breath. A heartbeat. And then, the kiss. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't rehearsed. It was collision, grief and longing, pain and forgiveness, all tangled into something that shouldn't have existed and yet did. She tasted the years of guilt on his lips, the ache of every life he'd taken, every night he'd spent alone. And beneath it, she tasted the man her sister had once loved, the one who might still be capable of saving himself. When they finally pulled apart, both were shaking. "This is wrong," Aria whispered, but her voice trembled with confusion, not certainty. Rafael's eyes searched hers, desperate and raw. "Then why does it feel like the only thing real?" She stepped back, pressing her fingers to her lips. "Because grief makes us mistake need for love." He looked at her, wounded but silent. Aria turned toward the window, the storm reflecting in her eyes. "You can't stay in this world, Rafael. Not if you want this to mean anything. If you stay," she swallowed hard, "I'll lose you too." The words struck him harder than any bullet. He crossed the room slowly, stopping behind her. "You think walking away from the life I built is that simple?" She turned, tears in her eyes. "It has to be, because I can't fall in love with a man I'll have to bury." The honesty in her voice shattered him. For a long moment, they stood in the silence of everything they couldn't have. Finally, he reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You already have," he whispered. Aria closed her eyes, letting the truth sting. "Then prove I'm not a fool for it." The storm outside grew louder, thunder echoing through the villa like a warning. When she finally left, Rafael didn't follow. He stood at the window, watching the rain trace down the glass. Each drop a reminder that redemption, like love, always came with pain. Behind him, the candles flickered weakly, their flames struggling against the dark. And for the first time, Rafael DeLuca prayed, not for forgiveness, but for the strength to become the man she believed he still could be. By the time winter came to Barcelona, Rafael DeLuca had already started to burn his kingdom down. It didn't happen all at once. Power never falls that easily. It unravels, thread by thread, deal by deal, until the empire you built starts choking you in its own smoke. The first thing he shut down was the port. The shipments that brought him millions stopped moving. Then the casinos. Then the bribes. Each decision drew blood. And every man who once called him Jeef began to whisper his name like a curse. Rafael knew what he was doing. You don't dismantle a criminal empire and walk away untouched. You either die by your past, or make peace with it before it finds you. Aria Montes stood beside him through it all, though she didn't always agree with how he fought his war to end one. She watched him order his own men disarmed, watched him burn ledgers that could have bought him another lifetime of protection. She saw the way he didn't sleep, the way his hands trembled when he signed documents that erased everything he had built. Once she asked, "Why do it this way? Why not just disappear?" He had smiled faintly. "Because monsters don't get to disappear, Aria. They make their own graves, or they make amends." But the world he'd ruled didn't forgive betrayal, even if it was righteous. One by one, his lieutenants began to turn. Old allies sold him out to rivals. A convoy he was meant to meet exploded on the docks, gunfire shredding the air like thunder. Rafael barely made it out alive. He came home that night with blood on his shirt, limping, jaw clenched in silence. Aria was waiting for him in the villa, her heart breaking at the sight of him. "Rafael." She ran to him, pressing a towel to the wound at his side. He caught her wrist gently. "Don't. It's not deep." Her eyes flared. "You call this peace? You're killing yourself to bury a war that still lives inside you." He met her gaze, exhaustion flickering behind his eyes. "Peace was never supposed to be easy." "Peace," she said, voice shaking. "You think this is peace? Look at you. You're bleeding because of ghosts you refuse to let go." Rafael's voice hardened. "If I don't do this, I'll never be free of them. Valeria died trying to save me from this world. If I walk away without ending it, what did her sacrifice mean?" Aria's breath caught. "It meant she wanted you alive, Rafael. Not this, half man, half martyr." He turned away, jaw tight, staring out at the rain streaking the windows. "I can't stop, Aria. Not yet. Too many lives depend on what I undo." She moved closer, her voice trembling between anger and love. "Then at least face it. Stop pretending redemption is something you can buy with blood. You can't build peace without burying the war inside you. The words hit him like a bullet he couldn't dodge. He turned toward her, the storm outside mirrored in his eyes. How do I bury something that's all I've ever been? By choosing something else, she whispered. By choosing me. For a long time, he said nothing. The silence stretched, full of everything they couldn't promise and everything they already felt. Finally, he took her hand. His fingers were cold, trembling. I've never known how to love without destroying, he said. Then learn, she whispered. Start with this. The following weeks became a blur of endings. Rafael called his men one by one, offered them money to leave, to disappear, to start again. Some accepted, others didn't. There were gunfights in alleys, cars burned in the night, names crossed off ledgers that would never reopen. Each time he survived, he came home more haunted, more human. Aria never left his side. She patched his wounds, argued with him, prayed for him. And somewhere between the shouting and the silence, they found a fragile peace. One night, as dawn began to break over the city, Rafael stood on the balcony watching the smoke from the port fade into the pale sky. It's almost done, he said quietly. Aria stepped beside him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. And when it is? He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, there was no mask, no fear, no wolf in his gaze. Then I'll finally be the man she tried to save, he said, and the man you deserve. Aria smiled faintly, the sadness in her eyes softening. Just don't make me your redemption, Rafael. Make yourself your own. He nodded slowly, eyes glinting in the dawn. For the first time, he said, I think I can. The city was waking up. The sea shimmered gold. Behind them, the empire he'd built on sin was finally collapsing. But for Rafael DeLuca, it wasn't the sound of loss. It was the sound of freedom. Barcelona woke to a gentler kind of morning. The sea no longer smelled of smoke. The air no longer trembled with gunfire or whispered names spoken in fear. For the first time in years, the city breathed. And so did Rafael DeLuca. The empire was gone, burned, dismantled, buried. In its place, something new had risen, the Valeria Foundation. A sanctuary for those broken by the same violence that had once built his throne. A name that turned mourning into purpose. At its helm stood Rafael, quiet and resolute. Beside him, Aria Montes, the woman who had once walked into his world with nothing but truth in her eyes and fire in her voice. Together, they had turned tragedy into testimony. The Foundation's headquarters stood where his first casino once glittered, now rebuilt into a center for victims of organized crime. The irony wasn't lost on him. Neither was the redemption. On opening day, people filled the courtyard, survivors, families, faces once haunted by his own past. The press called it the rebirth of a man once feared. But Rafael didn't hear the noise. He only saw the light falling on the bronze plaque that bore her sister's name. Valeria Montes, love is not lost. It becomes legacy. As the speeches ended, Aria stepped to the microphone. Her voice carried through the crowd like morning wind. Forgiveness, she said, isn't forgetting. It's choosing to build something where ruin used to stand. Rafael's gaze never left her. There were still scars in his soul that no apology could erase. But as he watched her, strong, radiant, alive, he realized peace wasn't something given. It was something earned. That evening, the celebration faded into quiet. The staff left. The lights dimmed. Only the sea and the wind remained. Rafael and Aria stood on the villa's terrace, overlooking the sleeping city below. The horizon burned gold and rose as dawn began to climb over the Mediterranean. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer the heavy thing it once was. It was full of calm, full of life. Aria turned toward him. You did it, she said softly. You tore it all down. He gave a faint smile. No, we did. Her fingers brushed the railing, her eyes reflecting the dawn. Do you ever miss it? The power. Rafael shook his head. Power was just fear in a different suit. I mistook it for strength because I was too weak to face myself. She looked at him, the man who once commanded empires now standing barefoot under morning light. And now, he said, I'm learning to live without armor. A small smile touched her lips. That's harder than pulling a trigger. He chuckled quietly. You have no idea. Then his tone softened. You were right, Aria. I couldn't build peace until I buried the war inside me. You made me see that. She stepped closer, her voice gentle. And you taught me that even the worst men can still choose good. That's how the world changes, one choice at a time. The wind carried the scent of salt and jasmine between them. Rafael reached out, brushing her hair from her face. Sometimes I wonder if Valeria sent you. Aria's eyes glistened. Maybe she did. Maybe she knew you needed someone who wouldn't let you hide from yourself. He smiled faintly. Then she sent the only person brave enough to speak her words. Their hands met, fingers lacing together. The sun crept higher, gilding the world in light. Rafael leaned in, his forehead resting gently against hers. This world, he murmured. I built it for her memory, but I'll live it for you. Aria's whisper trembled against his lips. Then live, Rafael. Don't just survive. He kissed her, slow, reverent, full of every promise he had never kept and every truth he finally could. It wasn't the kiss of a sinner seeking absolution. It was the kiss of a man reborn. Later, when the sun broke free of the sea and the city below stirred awake, Rafael looked out across the horizon, the same place where everything had once burned, now washed clean by light. He spoke quietly, as if to the wind, as if to her. The wolf found peace, he said, not in the moon's light, but in the woman who dared to speak it. Aria turned to him, the dawn catching in her eyes like fire. And together, they watched the world begin again. Not with vengeance, but with love. The wolf found peace not in the moon's light, but in the woman who dared to speak it. And so, the story of Rafael DeLuca and Aria Montes came to its quiet end. A man who once ruled through fear found redemption in the only place power could never reach, the human heart. Love didn't erase his sins. It transformed them. And the girl who spoke her sister's secret words became the voice that silenced a war. The moon no longer waited for the wolf, because at last, the wolf had found peace. If stories of love, loyalty, and redemption move your soul, then you're already one of us. This is Mafia Soul, where every tale hides a heartbeat, and every shadow carries a secret. Subscribe now, join the family, and don't miss the next story where power, passion, and destiny collide again. These stories are born in the shadows and told with the heart. See you in the next video.